The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello and good morning. Thank you so much for joining us today, taking time from your busy schedule to attend our fourth in the Crisis Coach 2018 webinar series. Today we're going to be talking about prevention before escalation. We're going to be talking about behaviors of concern, both in the school and the workplace. And I hope we can share some good information with you about how we look for and spot behaviors of concern. And, sorry, I couldn't move my computer forward. You didn't need to know that, but I told you anyway. I am Karen, and I'd like to connect with you on Twitter. We are Firestorm Soul. On Facebook, we're Firestorm Solutions. Our YouTube channel is Continuity Experts, and you can view any session that we've done over the past 6 years, those specifically on schools, those specifically on business. And if you would like a session like this, specifically designed for your organization, just reach out to us and we'll be happy to make that happen for you. We are also Firestorm Solutions on LinkedIn, and we would love for you to connect with us on any of the social sites. If you'd like to ask a question during this session, if we have time at the end of the session, we will answer questions. And if not, for any reason, we will follow up afterward via email or a phone call. You can use the chat function in the GoToWebinar toolbar on the right-hand side of your screen. There's a little chat function. And you can always email us at webinars@firestorm.com. This exercise or webinar is not complete without accompanying oral comments and discussion, and any work product given by Firestorm should be read in conjunction with all guidance given by national, regional, and local authorities, as well as your organization's personal counsel. Moreover, the information given and comments made in this webinar should not be interpreted as legal advice or legal opinion. I'm sorry, can someone mute their phone, please? Bill or Ken, can you mute your phone? I hear some background noise there. Thanks, if you could. Appreciate that. I just want to briefly review for you Firestorm Services. We've made some pretty significant changes in growth since the first of the year. We're very fortunate to acquire a couple of companies that have added a depth and richness to our already deep and rich services. The first of those I'd like to talk to you about is our People Solutions. People Solutions involves not only deep analytical solutions, which you see on the other side of your screen, where we are publishing 6 premier studies annually on data and analytics around risk and crisis. We've just opened up our IT resiliency study, and you can learn more about that on our website and participate. You might want to participate in that or any of our studies because we will give you a complimentary copy of the report. The reports are usually about 45 to 50 pages. But also with our People Solutions, if you are looking to recruit talent or you are someone who is looking to explore new opportunities in crisis risk, business continuity, our People Solutions division can help you. More important, or not more important, equally as important, but we're very excited about the addition to our Security Solutions team of a company called Secure Education Consultants, now part of Firestorm Security Solutions. And the team there are all former Secret Service personnel, high-level, high-ranking Secret Service personnel who have done extensive work with workplace and school violence. And we're all learning more than we knew before, and the weight of the breadth of Firestorm's knowledge in this area now is unsurpassed. So I'm very excited to share some information with that with you going forward. And please visit our website, and you can learn more about all of our solutions and specifically our security solutions. Today would not be possible without the great folks at the Virginia Association of Independent Schools. Please visit the website and learn more about upcoming events, supportive resources for you and your schools. And if you're a guest outside of the Virginia Association of Independent Schools and you're in another state or you may not be a school, you may be a business entity, please reach out to us and we can talk about sponsoring your organization or giving you support in your specific area. I'd also like to thank Kim, who is the Director of Programming Communications for the Virginia Association. And our principal in this area is Ken Mercer. Ken, would you like to say anything about the Virginia Association of Independent Schools and other associations that we support?
Good morning, Ken. Thank you. We've been delighted with the relationship to the Virginia Association of Schools. It has been a valuable relationship for us, and I believe also for the association. I've recently, in the past couple of weeks, got to work directly with a few schools that were referred to us and had some needs. We very quickly met those needs, and very happy with the outcome. Thank you, Karen, for taking on this webinar today. It's a topic that's in the news and important to all of us, particularly in the education marketplace. So thank you very much, and thank you to the Virginia Association of Independent Schools.
Thanks so much, Ken. And again, everyone, thank you for taking the time today for this 45-minute session. And if I talk too fast or too slow, I'll apologize ahead of time. I am Karen Masullo, and I am our Chief Intelligence Officer. One of the things that we've been the path we've been walking along this year. We started out the year with a general overview of how we identify and assess our vulnerabilities and crisis and risk. And then we moved into a two-part mini exercise. You know, when a crisis occurs, it occurs in about 15 minutes or less. And the time you have to respond is greatly condensed. And you used to have some time to plan, maybe 20 years ago, but today you have seconds in order to make decisions, and we can't make clear and good decisions in a crisis without data and information. And we know that most information we learn in the first few minutes or hours of a crisis is wrong. So unless you have really great data coming to you, you're going to have trouble with your critical decision support in a crisis. The decisions during calm are challenging, so you can imagine during a crisis. More important, decisions can be subjective to your position, where you are when a crisis occurs, who's around you, your surroundings, your environment, your knowledge. And so having an objective outside party can be very helpful. So I want to remind everyone on this call, whether you are a member of the Virginia Association of Independent Schools or another group or a business, because you're on this call, mention this call, and we have the opportunity to help you in that first hour of a crisis through a program we have called Crisis Stop. We want to help you stop the crisis. So call us, whether it's for 15 minutes or for an hour. We will talk to you. We will help you calm down, get organized, figure out your next steps so that your first response doesn't become the next crisis. We do this for you because we know that many people view a crisis as a singular event that is not going to happen to them. If it happens to you, as it did to two schools this month that Ken worked with from the Virginia Association of Independent Schools, we want to be there to assist you. We will. Just call us, let us know that you're enacting your Crisis Stop program, and we'll move forward with you. We also have a couple of pieces of information for you. If you open up your GoToWebinar dashboard, there is an area in that dashboard that says handouts. You should see handouts 2 of 5. We'll be referencing a couple of those. You can print those out, share those within your teams, within your organization. And if you would like one that is more focused on your specific need, you can reach out at webinars@firestorm.com and we'll help move you through whatever supporting documentation you may need. Today we're going to talk about identifying behaviors of concern. And I think this is a critically important subject because quite often we think we know what behaviors of concern look like. And when an anomaly does occur, when a crisis does occur, and we look at the person who is at the center of that, we realize we didn't know, or we knew some things but not others. It didn't unfold in exactly the way we had mapped. And that's what's critically important. If we start looking at behaviors of concern, in documenting those behaviors, we can start to see a pattern emerge that will help us when indeed we need to intervene to keep a crisis from occurring. Now, there are going to be outlier events within that, and we've seen that, where behaviors of concern were reported, and at that point, activities or actions weren't taken that could have averted a crisis. And now, this has become an issue that is on the national stage, where it should be. The safety of children, the safety of people at work should be front and center as an issue. And so we're going to talk more today about how we look at early signs of behaviors of concern. And then next month, we will talk about, should there be a need to respond, what that response looks like. For today, I want you to think, again, whether you're a school or you're a business, the key components of an effective violence prevention program are really pretty straightforward. You need leadership support. You need buy-in. You need everybody at the table to say, this is a priority. And it can't be lip service. It can't be checkbox compliance. It has to be a true dedication to making sure people are safe. Then you have to have very clear policies and procedures. Jim Satterfield has a great piece of advice. He's our CEO. And his advice is that you should go to the latest hire in your organization, the newest employee, and you should ask them very specific questions about your internal policies and procedures and see if they know the answers. Not as a test to them, but as a test to your ability to impart knowledge. And if they don't know the answers, then you need to revisit how you're onboarding and the materials and the training that you're implementing. You must have a very clear weapons policy. You must have very clear anti-bullying and harassment policies. And that is not just student to student, but it can be student to teacher and teacher to student, employer to employee, employee to employer. And you must have background checks, not only when you hire, but annually thereafter. You must have a clear view of your physical security. In a few instances that we have seen recently, which it's a sad thing to even have to say a few instances, but specifically when we look at Parkland, Parkland was a multi-million-dollar facility that had been designed around security aspects. Part of the failure was the time of day. The security gates were open to allow cars in and out and buses in and out. And that's how the shooter entered the property. When you have someone work with you from the ground up, the day you start with the first blueprint is the day you should have your security analyst at the table. When I mentioned Jason Russell to you and our former Secret Service team, that's what they do. They'll sit down the day the blueprints are drawn and start to talk about the ifs, the whys, the whens, and what ifs, and help prevent from the moment you're in the building phase for some opportunity to have cars come in and out of your property without violating the security procedures put in place. So think about your physical security, your cameras, what they're looking at, how your doors are situated, windows, glass, etc., and we can assist you with that. Then the other key part of your program is the Behavioral Risk Threat Assessment Program, which we're going to talk about today. We call it BERTHA. Those of you who are familiar with ALICE training tells you what to do in the midst of an active shooter. BERTHA is sort of ALICE's big sister. It comes before, during, and after. And we've worked with the folks at ALICE to conduct co-training. And then once a situation is occurring, you need an emergency and an incident response plan and the ability to look at what went right, what went wrong afterwards should an incident occur. You know, we asked you a few different questions. We're going to look at some polls. This is a question we've asked over the year, and it is, how concerned are you about some of these selections? So how concerned are you about violence in general? About 50% of the people said, we're concerned about all of these issues. These are frightening things to us. And there was, I think one person said, not at all, not going to happen, so it really didn't register. Some people said, we're not too concerned, you know, nothing's going to happen to us. And if you take that very and that somewhat, and you put those together, you realize that everyone is concerned about this issue. We're seeing it happen too often to too many. We also asked you some questions that show me we're making progress over last year. We asked this question last year, and the stats, the responses now are in our estimation, healthier in terms of a good program. One of them was, I know how to anonymously report a behavior of concern in my workplace or school. 91% said yes. That is a huge improvement. We're really pleased to see that. You must have some mechanism for anonymous reporting that assures the anonymity of the person reporting, but allows them to clearly articulate and follow up with any information that can help lead you to intervention. Next, the question was, my organization has a designated team to review behaviors of concern. That has a little more room for growth here, but we do have about 74% of people saying, yep, we got a program, and I know this is true. I've done several presentations over the last couple of months to groups of different school districts. And when we do, we find we have school psychologists, we have security folks, we have leadership, we have representatives of all aspects of the school, the same thing for businesses. We're starting to get everyone at the table with formal teams who understand the severity and urgency of these types of programs. So well done, everybody. You're really growing your programs, and that's terrific. One of the things that we know is that almost every disaster is preceded by some type of warning signals. I was doing some research recently for our COO, Hart Brown, and we were looking for what are the repeated types of words or phrases that perpetrators of workplace or school violence may use. One word did filter up, and it wasn't what you would think. You would think, gun, I'm going to shoot. The word was rage. Consistently, we saw rage, disgust, and views that the targets were entities, were things, and were no longer people. So that lack of human empathy was starting to become quite evident. If you look or would like resources, I'm sure those of you who are school psychologists or workplace psychologists can speak to this and have the resources, but I can also point you to some. There are archives of, for example, the complete manuscript from Elliot Rogers, who was the shooter in California, who had 11 hours of YouTube manifesto where he talks about this building rage. And the words, the verbiage, looking at his behaviors is exceptionally helpful. And that is the key point. He left a manifesto. There was a shooting just over the weekend and into yesterday where someone committed a murder. He killed his mother and a good friend and posted all of his reasons why and his story, his mini manifesto on Facebook. So being able to scrape these different social sites, message boards, Reddit, 4chan, and others, and then start to apply artificial intelligence to be able to, within seconds, do what it used to take us hours to do. We can start to calculate and see behaviors of concern much more quickly than in the past. And we have the tools to do it. So we've come a long way in a very short period of time. Now, when we do that, and I'm sorry, there's a typo on the page, and I'll correct that. We see threatening behavior versus behaviors of concern. And we want to talk about what is the difference. So I want you to think about this right now. I want you to think, we know what threatening behavior looks like. It's very clear. Threatening behavior is when someone says to you, if you do that, you will be sorry. It is direct. It is specific. I am going to do this to you at the end of the school day out by the buses. Or it's conditional. If you don't do what I say, I'm going to do this to you. It can be veiled. It can be implied, but might not explicitly threaten. We see when children are groomed by abusers this kind of behavior. We can't tell your parents. We can't tell anyone because you're the one who will be at fault, who will get in trouble. Or indirect threats where they lack specificity. You won't see it coming, but it's coming. And we see this through very clear behaviors. We see bullying. We can see when someone's bullying someone or someone is the victim of being bullied. Now, cyberbullying is a little bit different. Cyberbullying is new in the fact that you can't escape your abuser. It used to be at least you could go home, you could talk to your mom and your dad, or if you were in the workplace, you could go home, you could talk to your family. Today, the bully follows you on social media, in your text messages, and elsewhere. We see very clear examples of threatening behavior through an actual fight, physical violence. And it's become more and more popular, as you know, to not intervene in a fight, but rather to film it on your phone and post it to Facebook Live or YouTube or Vimeo. There's stalking, destruction of property, and then certainly a weapon at school. I mean, these are very clear threatening behaviors. Then we have warning flags, and some are very clear. It's when people actually are making comments about cutting, hurting themselves, self-harm, or suicide. These are never a joke. Even if the person says, oh, I'm just joking, they're never a joke. Intimidating comments about hurting someone else. Think about it. And one thing I would encourage you to do in your own personal language and lifestyle, you know, we use some words in a rather frivolous way. Oh, I'm just going to kill that person. Let's try to get those types of light threats out of our own verbiage, because we need to be able to clearly listen for when they happen and they're real. And with children, they're never not real. How about fits of rage? I mean, that's a really clear indicator that something's wrong, especially when we see a distinct behavioral change. or destroying of property, other people's or their own. But other red flags might not be so clear. And we're fortunate in this country that we really have dedicated people in our schools who have become exceptionally well educated in the nuance of what to look for in behavior. So how do we know? Well, we've seen in a lot of, again, the archive of shooters and those who've attacked with deadly weapons, not necessarily guns. We have seen a consistency of a fascination with weapons or a past history of criminal violence of some type in the workplace, etc. I was looking at a few of the different instances in preparation for this session and another that I'm doing this month. And this is it's a challenging line to walk. I noticed some behavior on one of the social media sites that really bothered me. I saw some people talking about an attack on a school. And they were talking about it in very explicit detail about what weapons they would use. They had far more knowledge about weapons than I certainly do. They were talking about dates and times. And I realized it was part of one of the first person shooter games that's played with as a team, and they were coordinating their movements on a social media site. I think it's appalling that the games have a first-person shooter scenario that involves a school or a workplace or any other, but they do. They exist. And so we have to think about that type of fascination. Now, I know many schools have programs with sporting games and gaming, technological gaming, as a part of their sport programs. And it's great. Kids enjoy it and they have a great time. But I think we need to also keep an eye on what scenarios are being used in those games that we may not be seeing as a part of the school activity, but as a part of home activity. We also see an increase in substance abuse and drugs and alcohol and whatever the drug of choice may be right now. For a generation, there's some really scary stuff out there. Flocka, and there's a spate of Flocka right now that's killing people. It's causing uncontrollable bleeding. So we have another issue that we need to think about, and the ongoing depression that goes along with that, and then possible suspected abuse in the home. And we see major changes in behavior. So someone who was formerly gregarious, suddenly withdrawing from classmates or teammates or friends and activities that they may have been involved with. So that early warning signal comes up, and that's when we have to start intervening. We don't have time to not intervene. Now, we're going to look at some behavioral risk factors and warning signs. And this is all a part of the base of the Behavioral Risk Threat Assessment Program for Firestorm. And the behavioral snapshot starts with some very basic behaviors of concern. First, we see that history of discipline problems. So I want you to think about right now your school or your workplace. And I want us to remember this does not only apply to students, but can apply to other people within your school or your organization, employees or others. Is there been a history of discipline problems? Are they just starting? Does this person have access to or possession or use of firearms? It really is a regionally geographic thing too, right? I grew up both in New York and Ohio. In both of those areas, I had relatives who were hunters, hunters of duck or game. And so learning to use a firearm was something that was taught very early. And on hunting, the opening of hunting season, you could expect half of the class to be absent because it was a very important day. So we need to take that into consideration from a geographic point of view. Does that access to arms, is that unusual? Is it part of the culture of the organization or of the community? Something we need to look at is someone who takes criticism suddenly very poorly. Maybe they used to be open, but now they're holding resentment. They just can't let it go. They must prove that they're right. Someone who's been an average or a good student suddenly drops off completely, or the same with work habits. Everything was going great, and then suddenly there's a dramatic change in performance. How about suddenly relationships that used to be good suddenly are strained? Suddenly the person is starting to isolate themselves. Suddenly the person becomes preoccupied with process and procedure and deems them to be not only unfair, but directly written for them, for that person. So they're perceived to be personally unfair. Suddenly the person starts escalating and may start sending concerning emails or text. They may start sending phone calls. We had a situation recently where we worked with an organization that had received 13 phone calls in one day of increasingly threatening conversation and behavior from someone who actually had the wrong organization. They were targeting the wrong organization in general. But it was still a critical situation, and people were very frightened and felt threatened. Suddenly there is direct or indirect threatening communication. It may be with drawings or writing, manifesto type writings on social media, verbal statements, and this is coupled then with a history of that past violence, anger, or aggressive behavior. There could be acts of harassment or sexual harassment or intimidation in the person's background. We see a great deal of drug and alcohol abuse, and one of the other early indicators that we may start to see is a difference or decline in personal hygiene or significant change, not just a child or a person exploring a new look, but a significant change in that regard. When it comes to the social or peer group, the behaviors that we suddenly start to see are someone who used to things maybe would just pass over is holding a grudge. They really have a hard time letting go of a teacher's comment, another student's comment, a parent's comment. They suddenly have odd or erratic behavior that creates fear and concern in others. And that's where that anonymous reporting is really important. You have to be able to give people the ability to report without feeling that they may increase a threat against them. Suddenly someone becomes intolerant of differences. And whether this is some self-education or external education, here in Charleston, sadly, we had someone who became increasingly intolerant of others, and Dylan Roof opened fire on a church here. And there was a history of this type of comment and growing intolerance, social withdrawal, and he was a victim of bullying or violence himself. He did identify with violent groups, with hate groups. We see that in connections on social media. And when we look at social media, remember, this is nothing that's private. We are not allowed and would not look at private communication. But we can see what is publicly posted or people publicly connect to. And we can look at an overview, and if suddenly someone who used to be in 4-H is connecting with online hate groups, that's a reason to be concerned. And they start posting or engaging with angry or threatening statements on social media and use very abusive, racist, or misogynistic or other abusive language, and suddenly just can't have boundaries. They don't have boundaries. They don't want to set limits or use limits, and rules and regulations become personal attacks against them. We also must look at family issues. Those of you who deal with this every day know that this is just not a one-dimension issue. We need to look at any suspected or confirmed abuse going on in the family, any significant change going on in the family. Are there parents, or is there a custodial person in charge? Are they in foster care? Are they adopted care? Are they being cared for by grandparents, by other relatives? Has there suddenly been a significant change? Do we have parents who suddenly lost jobs, plus there was a loss of life, plus there was a significant move? All of this can shape emerging behaviors of concern, those multiple losses. And then we must start to look at, is the person of interest, again, it's not necessarily a student, it could be someone within your organization, within your school, other than a student, but are they starting to demonstrate paranoid thoughts or feelings of persecution? It's that feeling of persecution that starts to bubble up, that rage at others that we've seen a pattern of. And there's a start of delusional or fantasy thinking. Coping skills are very poor. And there are excessive growing feelings of isolation, being alone, and hopelessness. There are feelings of rejection and shame. Also, a sense of entitlement. As we said, there may be indications of self-harm. If we look at the Parkland shooter's social media posts on Instagram, there were a number of cutting behavior, images, and self-harm. And actually, there were a number of social media posts that ran the gamut from support to disgust of Islam to talking about others as if they were stupid and worthless. There was a huge fascination with weaponry on his social media accounts, knives, guns, others. And he had a significant number of people following him, liking and encouraging the behavior. There was fascination with violent fantasy, ideation of that on his social media posts. And that pattern of under-controlled anger. You know, we see that in instances of road rage, and you'll see that in the halls in your school, where something simple will happen. Someone will accidentally bump into someone, and it becomes a huge situation. There becomes an eruption of anger. And there's a pattern. Or there's a pattern of over-controlled anger. You just see that rage building. And that person has feelings of being bullied, picked on, or persecuted, even though they may be the perpetrator of bullying and persecuting others. They may perceive it to be against them. So when we move into the urgent phase, that's where we have a significant issue now needs to be reported. The police need to be involved. There's a weapon. There is a direct threat of violence. I will tell you that after Parkland and after any incident of violence, whether it's at work, a workplace, or a school, we see significant copycat activity. I want to congratulate all of you on this call who are in our school systems, because you're trying to teach kids. In the meantime, you're dealing with 5 or 6 or 7 threats a day that are posted on social media. They're written on bathroom walls. They're called in. And every single one of those has to be responded to as a real and a significant threat. And I know that because of the increase after an incident, it makes it almost impossible to do your jobs. And I just want to congratulate those of you on the phone who do that every day. Immediate responses are also required for someone who's in a fight. They're having fights, and there could be serious injury. You know, if you look at school fights, if you do a search for school fights on YouTube, it's very sad what comes up. And they're not just, you know, a fight is never just a fight, but we see kids with weapons, with I saw one the other day. It was just appalling. Someone had a shovel. He grabbed a shovel and was beating the other person with the shovel. This wasn't a simple, I guess there is no simple fist fight, but this was rage, real rage, and involved severe destruction of property around them as well. It's that rage for something seemingly minor. Also, that immediate action must be taken when you see self-injurious behavior. You know, if you know there's cutting going on, if you see an incident of that happening, if someone is being stalked, and if someone is threatening self-harm. And I want to get to the suspended, expelled subject is seen back on the premise again as an important point. When I was talking to one of the co-architects of our behavioral risk threat assessment program, Wendy Ruffcorn, and we were talking about intelligence monitoring of a situation, she said, you know, in the case of Parkland, they probably were monitoring him up until the day they expelled him. And she said that's actually the day they should have started double monitoring. And it's true, because the day we terminate an employee or a student from their scholastic activities is the day where that person may say, if they are already exhibiting behaviors of concern, I knew I was right, I knew you were after me. And that may significantly escalate the behavior. That is not to say the action was not the correct action to take. There's just another step in the escalation of oversight that we must employ. Now, the things that can help in this type of a situation are personal attachments, close attachments to people, interest outside of school, a healthy respect for authority, the nurturing of positive coping skills, and the teaching of someone to take responsibility for their actions. This is a high-level overview of what the factors are for behavioral risk threat assessment, the early stages of behaviors of concern. Now, we know that we all need to be more proactive in documenting and understanding when and how and what if these situations occur. We know that if we have a central place and a central repository where we can keep this information, that when we report it to authorities, we have a clear path, we have clear notes, observations from more than one person, more than a vague thought, and we can demand action in a way that we can't when we just go to someone and say, I think there's a problem here. Now we have a documented, clear process that could indeed lead to a gun coming on our property. And that leads us to our behavioral risk threat assessment. The behavioral risk threat assessment is a program and a process that will assist you in identifying, assessing, managing, and monitoring behaviors of concern and next step actions within your school or your workplace. There are 4 core components, and they are described in the addendum sheet handout to this webinar. We can talk about this in greater detail for you If you would like to present this in your school, if you would like to explore it further, we're available to talk to you about that. But it's a very detailed program and currently is being supported by training on the University of Alabama's website. We developed the program, they developed the visual training, and once you're through the training with your license obtained through Firestorm, you will receive, your behavioral management team will receive a certificate of completion, and it is CEU qualified as well. So your entire team can take a training in this initial area, in the initial reporting and management of reports through a central system. There are training simulations and a central repository, excuse me. It was a different kind of an error. You will also have a BERTHA coach. There will be continued e-learning and virtual learning resources that go along with it and ongoing program support. And we help you understand where to start if your program is new. If your program is just starting to evolve, we can help you mature it. And if your program is very mature, we can fit in with all of the steps and pieces and parts that you're doing now, and we congratulate you on that. Today, what I'd like you to do is download the resources that we discussed that are in your GoToWebinar area, or certainly go to our website under our resources tab and you'll find a ton of other great information. You can contact us at webinars@firestorm.com for a self-guided assessment, and we can do a school or workplace violence, sort of a high-level co-assessment we do together. It takes about 45 minutes on the phone. We can get that done for you, and that's a great start. And we'd love to talk about our BERTHA program in more detail, and will next week. We're going to talk about once the BERTHA program is enacted and then what to do if an incident happens. And certainly register for next month's session. We have an infographic as well for you to download, how to spot the warning signs, connecting the dots, talks a little bit about what we've talked about today, plus a few more resources and ideas. And as always, I'd like to thank the Virginia Association of Independent Schools. I went over my time about 3 minutes. I do apologize for that. But I hope that just understanding behaviors of concern will help you as you start to look at your students, your employees, and start to mature your program. Bill, were there any questions, anything I need to answer, or shall we close our session for today?
There were a few questions, but I responded to them that we would be in contact with them individually.
Okay, great.
I'm going to leave, after you sign off, Karen, I'm going to leave the webinar open for a couple of minutes so they can download the handouts.
Oh, terrific. I appreciate that. Well, everyone, thank you for joining today. Thank you, Bill Baker, for being a wonderful moderator as always. Thank you, Ken, and the Virginia Association of Independent Schools. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact us. And thank you so much. This will end our session for today. Goodbye.